let us begin. Probably going to be a fairly. That's not a computer. Okay. Probably going to be a fairly short meeting. Just make sure that's all set up real quick. But, okay, there we go. Most of what I've been doing has just been getting the World Anvil prep for like the new classes I've been putting on there. Getting the rule sets that currently are just in docx's on my end of things. Placed on World Anvil as well. Basically, a lot of data entry. Um, Not a whole lot to go over in that regard. I've looked over some of the things posted in Firehouse. A lot of them are looking pretty good. You know, the lycanthrope's pretty solid. Need to go over it again properly. Looking at my own personal notes though, to put on World Anvil. The Sandy rules looking pretty good too, but you know, need to go over it for World Anvil's purposes. But it's getting close to being able to be on World Anvil soon. Pet system as well, getting to the point where I have started working on the article for World Anvil posting. So that should be available soon as well. Another side thing, I've been working on some more monsters because part of what I'm taking up my time has been prep for the campaign placed by Sunday group because they have completed their campaign, so get a new campaign to play in. Which means a lot of low-level monsters for our bestiary. Also been doing a lot of map work, which, dear God, this map work's taking longer than I was expecting. Like those manor maps I posted earlier, some of those were taking me about 4 or 5 hours just for the outlines of the town and stuff. It's pretty insane. Excellent. More monsters are always appreciated, especially those that will be definitely used in the 4 regions. That's your good. Other than that, though, I haven't done anything else of note. Do we have anything on the docket? People would like to bring up anything that we have, legacy side of things, anything like that?
The roadmap progression side, yes.
Excellent. And let us look at the roadmap.
Few people are missing today, so we can hold off on the big discussion of mission handling and write-ups, so if you're watching the VOD, try and be here next week. For today though, we might as well go through some initial discussions of downtime days and real time.
That is a good topic to go.
So, there's a number of ways we can do this, and I'd like to hear if anyone have thoughts or opinions on any of them, or preferences. There's 3 factors to consider: real life time, in-universe time, and downtime.
My current thoughts on the downtime, which this is just thoughts, would be using a in-world downtime time passage system tied to real-world time passage. That way, we won't have to worry about how long certain things take. It's just, oh, you're doing some RP stuff this day, then you can, once the day ends, it's covered. That does put a little bit of an issue in terms of different time zones, but people can still work on like the RP from a day prior. One person's on time zone A and one person's on time zone B. So long as they understand that by the end of the week, those 7 days will pass, or however many days we determine that week. But it should be in like increments of, 7. Right? My original idea. That's just baseline. It's totally not set in stone. As for downtime days, those would be similarly tied in some way towards the passage of time. So, like, if we decide that this week is 14 days of time passage, the downtime would be similarly set. And regarding downtime itself, downtime, in my current view, is just downtime. There's no crafting days / downtime days. It's just downtime.
It's the real life to in-universe time direct correlation, which is simple to reference but has potential issues for matching up with your game's and world progression.
Mm-hmm.
This is the most similar to the old one. There's also the option of arbitrary world time progression, based instead on world events and progression, rather than depending on IRL time.
Yeah. Arbitrary system could also work. It could cause some issues, but so long as we have a proper amount of downtime being provided and the progression of, stories are in fact progressing, then it shouldn't be an issue.
Honestly, as long as we're consistent with how many days we're giving out every single time, it's not like before where it's like, oh, someone screwed up. Here's only 3 days instead of 7.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to go back to that. As long as we're consistent on the days that we give out every time that we give an update, which I assume would be a Sunday, I think.
Yeah, it would be the Sunday meeting.
Then that works out because at least then everybody involved knows, hey, we're getting insert number of downtime days we're going to give.
Mm-hmm.
Then it works out for everybody.
The only thing that could limit that would be like major world events, but those would be more of like.
For example, there could be an in-world period of a week, which will provide 7 downtime days, but that only progresses once a specific event happens. Potential issue with that one would be player missions going too far in the future instead. You'd need some kind of a cooldown / catch-up system to keep everyone roughly in line even if their current campaign progresses significantly during a single period.
In this system, if a progression of a major story does not occur, is there no downtime provided for the week?
Those are the 2 major options. I'll write down the notes in no mic for reference.
Well, we do have the guild system we were talking about, so a player could theoretically, during the downtime between missions, like, because obviously it would be every week or so, could theoretically say teleport back, go to a person, be like, hey, I'm putting 7 days into whatever they want, insert whatever here, and then go back. And assuming they're not in a battle or they're not about to start a battle. Like they're actually like in a time period where they are in fact safe.
Assuming they're not in some form of world lock.
Yeah. Like how we brought up last time, the seal won't work unless, you're safe
Mm-hmm.
or in a state where you're not under attack.
Yeah.
That would solve our issue and does play into our guild system.
Mm-hmm. So there's the arbitrary time shift. There is the real world time shift. We could have a time shift, a third option, wherein the region heads and mission head all discuss the proper amount of time required for that week or that section of the world, based upon their individual like mission structures and things of that nature to give a proper amount of time passage to fit the world. So kind of like a mixture of the two. Example of that would be all mission or region heads plus the mission head together. They determine that due to the nature of Baruja's campaign that's going on and Arlogus's campaign and some weird shenanigans that were going on within Eldiria, 10 days would pass. And thus they provide X number of downtime days. Compared to option A, which is the real world time, where hey, look, a week's passed, so a week passes in game, or maybe a lot has happened, so we decide 2 weeks have passed in game. Still, variations of 7 essentially. Then there's the option 2, which is the I don't remember the term you used for it, but essentially ambiguous time passage that only passes like enrolled time in blocks based upon major world events. So if, for example, the Aldira's campaign it's a milestone, we would pass, like 20, 30 days or something like that, maybe more or maybe less. And then, provide downtime as needed. Those are the 3 general downtime world time passage that I'm currently seeing. Thoughts on those?
Uh, I mean, Jokey does bring up a good point. How would, uh, like, say, someone who gets inflicted with madness conceive time? Not that I want to obviously screw with downtime days, but
Mhm.
if we're using sanity and madness, I could see that screwing with someone's concept of time.
Yeah. I think for someone who is afflicted with such things that might
Mhm.
fuck with their uh, view of time,
Yeah.
that would be on the madness end of things. In terms of actual mechanical stuff, I think they would still function the same.
Yeah.
But with such characters, we definitely would want something that's set in stone, because a lot of these madnesses, a lot of these afflictions, are heavily tied to how many days have passed.
Mm-hmm.
So having a bit more of an ambiguous one would require more work on our end to get it working properly. Especially for like diseases. If someone catches a disease, those are not something that are handled, weeks or whatnot. Those are, you need to get this fixed in a couple of days, or things are going to get pretty nasty.
Yeah.
Especially if it's, a really infectious disease. But, a lot of the really infectious diseases are higher tier.
Notes and no mic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just reading through it. Looking at these, I know you're working on more right now, but the first two that I'm seeing right now, there is some drawbacks for both. The big one for the first option would be any potential desyncs with my campaigns. But that's not too much of an issue, since my campaigns would be the ones I'm currently running. They're more of a prior to actual launch of the Living World, so they wouldn't even coincide with the Living World at this time. Ones I would run going forward would be tied to the Living World, though. And I'd probably be using Living World players for them. So, I'd just be along with everyone else, right, essentially.
Unfortunately, I think regardless of what you do, you're going to end up with some kind of desync in some shape or form, because there are missions that could last like 8 sessions but only take place over the course of 4 hours,
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of things.
I don't. Both do work. I think allowing stockpiling does help us out, because then, like, if like how Zim says, like, you could be on a 12 session campaign, and you know you, you come back and spend all your days, at least you are on par with everybody else who would also have gotten their item at that time.
Mhm.
When the person just went, hey, I spend 52 days on this sword.
Yeah, it's an imprecise catch-up mechanic,
Yeah.
but I think it's necessary.
Yeah.
There's always going to be something like that, I feel like, unless you're going to limit everyone else's progression because, this campaign's very slow.
Mm-hmm.
I think working out a cooldown mechanic or some kind of a limiter for character progression would allow for the best of both worlds, letting people do super consistent campaigns but not outstrip everyone else in both downtime and XP.
No,
I think part of that, having some form of limitation would be nice to have, just for other players' purposes. But on the other side of things, we will have players who simply cannot play as often as other players. It's players who, for example, I know we'd have several who run on shifting schedules. So their job itself says, oh, you work these days, and the next week work these other days, where they cannot consistently play games. They'd have to be playing games under our part-time GMs, because they can only really do one-shots. Now, obviously, we should accommodate them as best we can. And having some form of desync mission system would be helpful, a cooldown system, as you said. But we do need to keep that in mind, that there will be players who realistically cannot play as often as other players. Nowhere near as often. Can't even get into full proper campaigns. So part of that discussion should definitely keep that in mind, so that the cooldown will function.
Fair enough, and we don't want to cripple more consistent players because of that.
Mm-hmm.
We'll just need to figure out an arbitrary average that we're happy with, depending on which system of DTD we go with.
Well, Shadow, the way it worked before when we were doing it, and the other thing was, when you're in a game, you are technically simultaneously both in the past, present, and the future. So when you're out of the mission, you have all of your stuff. When you're in the mission, you don't, because the mission is in the past.
Anyhow, today is mostly just discussions. We'll set up a vote sometime in the next few weeks and then go from there.
See here. I think in terms of people stuck in missions, it will probably be less commonplace, I feel. Especially with the guild seal, the way it works. That does give us the question, though, people who do use the guild seal in mission, because oh, hey, they're, spending a night or something like that in a tavern, and they're not, in any threat of attack. And they use the guild seal to head back to, the guild. If they use their downtime days when back at the guild, are they good to return with their results from said downtime days?
That's true, Ricky, because if they kind of like how we had the crafting system before, we had items that could were really good,
Mhm.
and like
Personally, I'd say it's up to the DM, in terms of how long their break can be. So if the
Like-
DM says no, this is a super time sensitive thing, but I'll still allow you to go back for a party/event/whatever, but you won't have time to go shopping.
I think for these such things, the best way to go about it would be to have different versions of lock, like we had before, where we'd have world lock, where they simply cannot return to the world, for whatever reason. We would have inventory lock, where their inventory cannot be changed, as we had before. We would have, I don't remember what the third type of lock would be, but simple lock systems where the DM can apply based upon the situation in their mission at the time. For the most part, if they have like an hour, they should be able to go. They shouldn't be world lock, but if time is of the essence in their campaign, world lock should be on the table. And if their campaign is taking place within a day, then item lock can easily be applied, and their item list cannot be changed if they return to the guild. In terms of the three options above, thinking for the living world specifically, I think the third option would probably be the most appropriate. Just because it gives us the benefit of both options while limiting the drawbacks of either one. Yeah, those would be some solid lock options right there. Yeah. And with the third option, regional world progression, since we're already going to be having region head meetings to discuss what's been going on with the different regions and how that might impact the other regions and the overarching plots, it would just be a docket add of how many downtimes would this thing provide, how many days have passed in universe. So, a small discussion added.
Right. Does anyone have any other suggestions for possible methods or adjustments to the current notes? If not, we're good for today. Feel free to leave any other notes or thoughts you have in the chat for next week, and we'll get a vote up at some point.
I would say as well. Mine's blanking right now. Let's get the vote up on that sooner rather than later. Just have it ready for next week or maybe the week after that. Just because we're getting to the point where we're fairly close to launch, and these sorts of questions, while important, I don't think we really need to wait like 3 weeks to get it set up. People will be reviewing the VOD, and will have knowledge of what this is going on. So, do not need to limit ourselves in terms of this week's meeting. Should probably be fairly
Agreed.
in terms of,
Rather than wait for everyone to be here at once to vote, we can just leave it up for a while instead.
Yep. You have the system in place, plop it down into no mic vote, and then people have time for the week to vote it up, and then the week following we can go from there. But yes, as you were saying, people have anything they would like to add, any questions or the like, now is the time to provide your whatnot.
Do we just want to lock their inventory just for everything?
What do you mean?
Once they start the mission?
I think going by how we did in the past, which was basically up to the GM to say if it's inventory lock or not, is fine. Because if they're not actively doing stuff where you think the inventory should be locked, then that's fine. And if If you do think they should be locked, then that's also fine.
Yeah. I just don't want a like. I think depending on the gym is fine. I just don't want an instance where like they come back and like, kind of in Shadow's example, they come back with like an item and then the GM himself or the DM had planned, they already had this stuff and then they start the fight and all of a sudden he's like two turned because they came back with something else.
Well, if they're in the middle of a dungeon, then yes, they should be locked. But again, it's
Yeah,
the GM's discretion.
Yeah.
I think it's GM discretion is the best option here. Simply because if they are in such a situation, it's be fairly obvious to apply an inventory lock on the location. If you know they're going to a dungeon, they're not going to really have any time to, bamf out of there. Having an inventory lock seems like an easy slap. That said, some DMs might not know they have such abilities, so we should definitely add this to our docket of training on what we're going through for review for training. So they know that their options are as such.
I don't know if they still go through it, but it was definitely something I put on the interview material for like locks and how running missions works.
Mm-hmm.
Good. All right. Any other questions? Comments, concerns, things to bring up?
You did get one more person signing up, I think. Yeah, a couple
Very nice.
days ago.
Very nice. Hopefully we can get on the training peeps soon. Once my focus shifts from, prepping for the launch, I can change my shift to helping out with training. But, if anyone has interest, we do have a bit of a backlog, so use some people to help out with training. I had something I was going to say, then I completely forgot it.
But it won't work if you don't cross the streams.
No, you're not supposed to cross the streams.
Anyways.
They cross the streams. It seemed to work out for them.
It's one of those things. But that's everything. That is the meeting. I appreciate everyone's face. Appreciate all the work you've been helping out with and all that good stuff. The following week, I should probably be having a lot more stuff on the World Anvil soon. Things to discuss in that regard. Obviously, we'll be having vote systems and all that regarding the above. We'll also likely have some new DDs to go over. My Sunday group's completion, they actually rated a new patron, so that'll be added on to the World Anvil as well. Other spicy stuff of that nature to go over too. But we'll see where it goes. Other than that, appreciate everyone's faces again, and I'm gonna drop the recording here.